Hello, Nima and Pratima. This video is going to describe the process for importing and organizing the Morningstar data into a usable format. Last week, you may recall, I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday, I sent you an email saying that the information is great, we just need to make sure that it's transposed so that it's usable. So anytime we have data that is repeated by time, we'll need a certain format for it to work, whether in SAS or Stata. We need it in a row format, row column format that's suitable. So if we'll look here at the raw data that we have the sec IDs here in column A, and then across here we've got all this, it says monthly return, and if we were to scroll around down here, we'll find probably some non-empty cells where we actually have some returns data somewhere in here. Surely this file's not completely empty. There we go. There's a make that a little bit bigger. So we have this for this sec ID, and then we have all these monthly returns. The problem is we need to get this data so that we have sec ID, the monthly return, and then the date, or sec ID date, and then monthly return in that format. So we should only have 3 or 4 we should only have 3 or 4 columns, one for sec ID, perhaps a year, and then a month, and then the monthly return, 4 columns, and everything else in rows. So we need to transpose that. Now the transpose data that we have here, that's just from the using Excel only, that doesn't really help us out anymore, right? Because it just flipped our problem around. Now we have the sec IDs here in the columns, and then the rows with the month. So that's not really what we need either. Now I renamed this tab right here Test, just because I wanted a really short name, because when I'm working with Stata, shorter names are better than longer names. So I'm going to show you a trick that we can do in Stata to get this done for us that's going to work, I think, better than what we have here with Excel. So just from experience, and you won't know this until you play with it, I think we're going to be okay with Stata importing this Excel spreadsheet in and not causing us any problems. Things that will cause us problems is too many spaces, and we have some spaces here, too many dash, and any special characters like exclamation points, bracket signs, anything like that is going to cause us a problem. What will also cause us a problem is if the variable name has a space in it and then it uses something that's a command in Stata. So for example, we'll see this a little bit later on, class. If a variable name has class with spaces on either side of it, Stata is not going to deal with that very well because there's actually a command in Stata called class. So we're going to work with this file right here, this tab here, this worksheet test, and we're going to directly use Stata to pull that in. So I'm going to minimize this screen and move that over. And let's look at, and I wrote a little bit of code. Anytime you write code in Stata, you're going to use something called a do file. So I've created a new do file, and the slashes here, these are just comment out, so this will not be processed, anything that's behind more than 2 slashes. You're coding your script, anytime you write a script, you'll want to write some type of description, the purpose, dates, versions, all that kind of information, because believe it or not, in a few weeks you will forget all about this. And it's also helpful if you solve a particular problem once, if you document your code, when you have that same problem in the future, you've already got code to do this, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So the first thing I like to do that I'm working in Stata in a do file is I like to define my file directory. In other words, where are all my files located and where are they going to be saved to. So anytime I hit a save file command, where is it going to be saved? Now your file directory system is going to be different from mine. So I created a folder called Morningstar 2017, and it's a subfolder into a folder that's called Chris-Morningstar, which is itself is in my main folder called Research. And then all this other stuff is just specific to my machine. So you will need to copy and paste in your own information for here for your file directory. So for the ETFs and the money markets, we had lots of files, right? We had the returns file, the net assets file, the expense ratio file, dividends, header information. We had lots of different files. So I'm just going to start with the returns file. We already did that Excel spreadsheet, and you'll see here we've got a couple of commands, 2 command lines. The first command line is the import line, and it's telling Stata to import this Excel spreadsheet, and it's located at this space right here, and it's called ETF space monthly space returns. Now, in Windows and in a iOS operating systems, you can have spaces. Stata doesn't like spaces, neither does SAS. We'll see that here in just a little bit. I want to import this sheet that's called test, and I want it to bring in the first row. Now I can remember that command line, or I can have a little shortcut. Is if I go back to the main page in Stata, I can hit File, Import, Excel Spreadsheet, and I can tell it, okay, which spreadsheet do I want to import in? I want to import in the ETF monthly return. And it takes a little while because it's obviously a pretty big file here. My system's a little bit slow. And I can tell it, all right, what worksheet do I want? I want the test worksheet, so that came up by default, whichever one's first. And I want to import the first row as variable names. And sometimes you have to give it just a second so that you make sure that that's clicked. And then I'll click OK, and everything looks like it's going to be okay. I think it's going to import in just fine. Now I've already done this process, and it's going to ask me, do I want to overwrite the data in the memory? I'm going to say yes, and it'll take it just a second to start doing this. Alright, so it's finished processing, and if I go over here to the command line, the last one that was done, there's that script, and we can always just cheat. This is kind of the lazy way of doing it, which lazy is good. Okay. And I could just copy and paste this right in here. So that's where that comes from. I just copy and paste that in the code. I don't need to do that. I've already done that. So I don't want to click this again because it would just re-import it again. So I can save this file. And let's take a look at the file. So if you go back to Stata, the main box, you'll see here the data editor. So I want to look at the data and see how it came in. If I look at the data editor, I can see across the top my variable names, sec ID, month ID, they're all in black, so these are the headers. So it looks like everything came in okay. All these dots are just, there wasn't any data there. So I can click on any column I want, and let's go over here and look at the name and see how that, so the name, monthly return, no space, no space, no space, everything's okay, except we got to get rid of this USD at the end. Stata's not going to like that when we go to the transpose. It wants to have the date at the very end. And there's no way of knowing this except just by experience, but that you're going to have to strip that off. Now we could have done that in Excel, but we can also do that directly in Stata, perhaps a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. So I'm going to close this. Let's go back here to our command. So I'm going to hit clear. Then I'm going to use that file. And the reason I'm hitting clear and then use that file is because every time I run this file, I don't want to have to re-import from Excel. And that's an important consideration because when you're writing the code, you will come across errors. You have to fix them. And every time you fix an error, you don't want to have to go back and re-import in from Excel unnecessarily. So just really quick going through this code. So I'm going to clear, I'm going to use that file, ETF monthly returns. The set more off is going to stop all this interaction between me and the output file, the log file. I just want it to all process because I'm not going to be reading the details on that. And this is completely optional as well. So set more off is optional. It's not critical. It's just, I like it. And I also like to know how long things take, so I like to clear timer 1, turn on timer 1, just so I can see how long this transposing takes. And I'm going to rename that file, that variable name monthly return, and then wildcard character USD. So if we go back to our data editor, click on one of these, so I'm going to have monthly return, wildcard character, and then USD. So that wildcard character is picking up the date right there. And then I'm going to rename it to simply monthly return, and then the wildcard character, the date, now without the USD. So I was able to get rid of that USD. Sometimes when you import data, you'll have duplicates, and duplicates are going to cause us a problem when we're reshaping. Now usually you want to figure out what's the reason for the duplicates, but here, since we're having a raw data file, it's probably just from the import procedure. Somehow it just generated some duplicates. Right? And then right here, instead of transposing, Stata has something called Reshape, where we want the data, the format of the data currently in Stata term is called wide data format. We want a long data format. So I want long, I want a new variable name called monthly return. And my existing is sec ID, and then I want it to pull that date out of that original monthly return variable name, to pull the date out of that. And I want to drop it if it's missing the monthly return. I want to generate a year. The way I do that is I recognize that I can just take the integer value of the date divided by 100 because there's 6 digits, and that integer value will be the year, and then the mode value in Stata with the date, and if I look at the last 2 digits, the hundreds, that's going to be where the month is. So I'm just telling it that's where the year and the month are located. I use these two commands because the data, when I look at it, is in a numeric format, so it's a number. Had that date, when we pull in the date, if it comes in as a string variable, we'd use a different set of commands to generate year and month. But I've already ran this before, and I know it comes in, it imports from Excel as a numeric, so I'm good. And then I want to order this data in this format right here. So I want sec ID first, date second, year, month, and then the monthly return. And then I'll finish this off. There's the timers. Then I'm going to hit save ETF underscore monthly returns. I don't want to have to re-import unnecessarily, so just for now I'm going to stick a 2 at the end of it and tell it to replace. Once I know that everything runs and there's not any errors, then I don't want to have multiple names of the same file called multiple things, so I'd get rid of this 2 and just rerun this all again and go back on my hard drive and erase this one that's called monthly returns 2. But I want to leave that in for right now. I'm going to highlight all this again. So I'm going to clear, start over, run all this. And I can see here it's already doing its reshape thing. The file has now processed. I put this on pause a little bit because it takes quite a while to run. So we can see here that script, this is why I like having the timer in there, it took 120 seconds to run that. It saved the file. Let's click at the data editor and see what our file looks like. Well, we have this the sec ID listed here, the date, year, month, and our monthly return. So it looks like we now have the data in the format that we want. You need to go back, check about a dozen or so random points in the data, and then go back to the original Excel spreadsheet and make sure that if you can do it, say 10 times, and 10 times the data that's in your new Stata spreadsheet is exactly the same as the data that's in the original Excel spreadsheet, then you can certify that it's good. That's an important step. Never assume that anything with your data merging, your data imports, your data manipulation is perfect. Always double check to make sure that it's right. So we've made sure that after making sure that that's right, I haven't done that, I'll need y'all to do that. Or remember I said I didn't want to have multiple files with the same thing, so I want to just save this under just one name, our ETF monthly returns, and I got that replace command in there. And running that, all right, I save that, and then next what I want to do is I can put in another command. It's called erase, and I'll put ETF monthly, make sure I get the caps right, returns 2. And that will eliminate that file that we created temporarily. It didn't erase on. Oh, got an extra space right there. ETF monthly returns 2. Alright, so that's now gone. That was the returns. Now let's look at the TNA file, and you can see this is the same code as we had before. I want to go ahead and just put in real quick here the save ETF underscore monthly underscore assets. Place, and just for right now we're going to call that a 2 just in case. Alright, so we'll go through the same thing. So let's go ahead and pull up so here is the net asset file. So when we look at the original data that was in that file, again this is in the wrong format, but I can see some column names, variable names are going to cause us a problem because we have more than one dash, then we have these special characters, the bracket, lots of spaces, and we have the word class, which is a command in Stata. So I think this is all going to cause us a problem. And while I can try to fix this in Stata, sometimes it's best to try to fix things in Excel, and you're going to over time you're going to find out which hacks that you like for Excel and Stata and SAS that works the best for you. So one of the things that I did was I want to use Stata, so I'll transpose this data, and you've already have this transposed Pratima in the file that you gave me. But notice in this file here that I've gotten rid of all this other stuff, right? So look here, this file name, I've got net assets dash share class brackets monthly bracket close 1978 with the USD, and I got this down to where it just says net assets, right? And I did that right, with commands such as the left command to pull out characters on the left hand side of that original, not this one, I've already cleaned this one up, but the original file name, as well as commands like right. Right, so I pulled up net assets from the very beginning, and then I pulled up the from the left, and then the 1978-01 space USD from the right. And then I could do a whatever you had for the left and use that amber sign and pull up whatever you come from the right. So the cell that was just the left plus the cell is the right, that will give us a new cell name. And then I can copy and paste that special into a new column, values only, and then I can get rid of everything else. So that's what I did there. So to get this into a much friendlier name for Stata to import into Excel, that's very key. And if it's not a friendly name and you go to import it, you'll see when you get into Excel it's just this big ugly mess, and it's just difficult to work with. Alright, so here's the original data, what it looked like, way too messy. We've transposed it. Right? Now the problem is we've got this transpose here, but it's still not in a usable format. So this is a little bit counterintuitive, and if I was a really good Stata programmer or maybe really good with SAS macros, I could do this all much more elegantly. But for me, I've now used Excel to fix this file name, so it's something that imports easy into Stata, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to transpose again back to the original format. And all that I've accomplished is now I'm back to the data looks just like it did at the beginning, right? The same column row format. The difference here is these names for these monthly net assets are much easier for Stata to import. So I don't think I'll have any problem. Again, this is more just experience and troubleshooting and figuring it out. And sometimes you bang your head up against the wall. It's just kind of figuring out how it's going to work. So now that I've got all this done, I can import this sheet into the monthly net asset. So I just highlight this and I'd click on do, and I would let it do its thing. Now if I did not write this out myself, I went back into the main Stata, went File, and then Import Excel, located the file, and then I let it generate the script for me. All right, so I've already done that in the background before. So right now I'm just going to run this. Exact same deal here, except I call this file now from ETF monthly returns. It's now ETF monthly assets. Notice we don't have any spaces. If we want to have a space in our file name, we use the underscore. The set more off, I want to use a different timer number 2, because I'm still interested. And let's see if the rename works okay. So I want to click on execute. I don't see any error messages. I want to click on the data editor. Right, and look there. We got rid of, we look at the file names, we got rid of net assets, we got rid of the space in the US dollars. So it all looks really good. So I'm going to close that. And let's go to the duplicates dropped, use the reshape command. Let's see how that works. And circle there, Stata is doing its thing. And this is going to take a couple of minutes, so I want to put you on pause. Okay, so we see that the code has reshaped from wide format to long format. 480 months, so that looks about right. We ordered everything, and it took about 123 seconds to process that. Let's take a look at the data editor and see what it looks like. So we have the sec IDs, we have the date column with the year, the month, and the net assets all neatly in there. We can look over here, we've got 5 variables here, 187,000 observations. So it looks pretty good, but again, we don't want to assume that it's correct. We want to go back, pick about a dozen, so 10, make sure that for the Stata file, for given year and month sec ID, that the net assets match up with what's in the Excel spreadsheet. But everything here looks correct. Alright, so everything looks okay. In the meantime here, the set more off, anytime that there is a space between that, say for example if there was a space here, the more would come back on when it saw a blank line, so I removed those. Everything looks okay, so I'm going to take out the 2, that temporary file name. Execute that so it's saved. And then I will use the erase command as well. Erase ETF underscore monthly underscore assets 2. And there we go. And then we'll have to do that. I left this right here for you. We're going to have to repeat this procedure for all of those other historical files, both for the ETFs and the money markets. Let me know if you have any questions.